Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first community conversation of the year. Today we're going to be talking about mudflows and anticipatory action ahead of mudflows. And this is a new hazard for anticipatory action. And we're focusing on Central Asia. And we've got three speakers with us today, and Ariel is going to lead the conversation for us. So I will hand over to you, Ariel.
Great. Thanks, Tim. My name is Ariel Tozier-Drapotri. I'm the Global Early Action and Research Advisor for the German Red Cross and the Anticipation Hub. And I have the pleasure of facilitating this conversation. Just to provide a bit of background, this conversation is kind of based upon the launch of a case study. I believe Tim will share a link to the case study for those of you who may not have had a chance to see it yet. It recently came out on Central Asia and their shift from working on heat waves and cold waves to mudflows. We decided earlier last year to focus on mudflows in the region in order to, for one, showcase the work that's being done in the region, and two, because they have recently completed a feasibility study on mudflows, and mudflows, as Tim said, is a new hazard that kind of presents some interesting challenges, etc. So we were curious to see how the national societies, the stakeholders, etc., were making the shift from heat waves and cold waves, kind of more traditional weather hazards, to something a little bit more complicated like mudflows. So I'm very pleased to introduce Ikram Soliev, who is the head of office for GRC in Central Asia. You can wave, perhaps, I guess your name is there as well. And then we are also here with Shavkat Abdujabarov. I'm sorry, I should have asked you for a pronunciation check when we were doing the technical check. And he is the GRC project manager for Kyrgyzstan. And then Sarafraz Mavlianov, who is the GRC project manager for Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. And so we have a rather small audience. My initial thought was to do a Menti to kind of get a sense for what people are working on and what brings them to this. I guess we'll do it anyways. I have just shared the link to the Menti there. There are two quick questions, and then I will share my screen with the results. Yes. Thank you, Tim. If you have questions for the speakers as we go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll either save them for the end or interject, depending on whatever is more appropriate for the question itself. So is everybody actually able to access the Menti directly? Is there a code that's needed? Must admit that I'm a little bit new to leading the Mentis. Okay.
I think you just need to go to the next slide now, Ariel.
Oh, okay. And are you now seeing the second slide?
Not yet, but it sometimes takes a second or two.
Okay. How about now?
Not yet.
Okay. Do I have to do anything other than just click on the second slide?
It should just go. Should just go on. Let me try again.
Or do I need to go to the results first and then go to the second question?
Do we have any Mentimeter experts in the room? I'm afraid I don't know.
Everyone always makes it look so simple.
I think maybe if you show the results from the first question, maybe that works. Let's try that.
Okay. Let me then just share my screen. All right, are you now seeing it? It's not the most elegant view because I can't.
You can on the top, you can click on present. And then it's full screen.
Ah,
Ah.
fancy that. All right. All right, so just out of curiosity, is anybody working on mudflows that is not a presenter? Perhaps you can unmute yourself as we are a small group. All right, so otherwise mostly other at the moment, which is very interesting. I'd be curious to know what. Feel free to drop that in the chat if you care to. So then next, all right, there we go. What is your interest in mudflows and or what brought you to this session? Perhaps now you can see, or now you're able to provide results for this?
Yes, now we can see the next question
Okay.
as well.
All right. All right, somebody's other is glacier lake outburst floods. Very interesting. All right, and let's see now. Starting to get some results. Fair enough. Just give it one more second. Yes, I don't know, I guess be everybody anyhow. All right, well, if there are there's other feedback. Oh. Great, well, thank you for joining us. All right. I've worked on debris flow quite a lot in the risk context and just very interested. All right, so most people are specifically interested in mudflows or expanding to new hazards. Great. Well, thank you all for being here then. I think I've now stopped sharing my screen. Well, technical difficulties abound. There we are. And so then I would like to turn it over to Ikram to just set the scene a bit and talk about anticipatory action and the Central Asian context in general to provide a little bit of background before we go into some more specific questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ariel. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this conversation. Well, we are as a Joma Red Cross working in Central Asia since 2007. And since then, we have done already a lot of projects. We are working closely with the Red Crescent societies of, it was for 5 countries. Central Asia includes actually 5 countries. Right now, we are working with 3, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. And our experience is more related since beginning to disaster risk reduction and anticipation and forecast-based financing programming. We have started, and that was for the first time initiative in Central Asia, almost 4.5 years ago. And actually, you know, the Central Asia is very prone to disasters because of geographical and topographical mountain areas. In countries that we are targeting, more than 60% population are living in the rural areas of mountains, and the countries are very much under the risk of floods, mudflows, landslides, but also earthquakes and droughts. Within our anticipation of forecast-based financing experience we brought to the region, what we have achieved so far, that in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, we have actually strengthened, first of all, capacity of the national society. Then, you know, it was easiest way to start, and that was result of the first feasibility study we have done to concentrate on the heat wave and cold wave scenarios because it's forecastable and it meets all requirements of the EAPs of IFRC settled from the beginning. So you have a trigger, you have a lead time, and you have everything to match the requirements. And cold wave and heat wave, we have now EAPs for Tajikistan approved already by IFRC. In Kyrgyzstan, we had EAP for heat wave approved and already activated last summer. And now we have resubmitted again for approval of IFRC. And for cold wave in Kyrgyzstan, we are now very close to submit to IFRC for approval process. So now why mudflow, actually, to set the scene for our discussion today, because the mudflow is the most frequent type of disasters in our targeted countries, happening every year. The season is from March to June, and by many statistics, I can tell you that, for instance, in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, government reporting or ministries of emergency situation, more than 1,500 villages under the risk of mudflows, and that is official statistic. On the other hand, you know, when we are talking from our experience as well, that the most valuable disaster risk measure would be to evacuate people, and they are also living in the very poor conditions in the rural areas because of economical situation in the countries. That, you know, there is another problem of labor migration that, you know, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, Uzbekistan as well. There is a problem that people are going to neighboring countries to find a job. And in rural areas, usually that is about big families, big and poor families. They're having more than 10 family members. So there are a lot of economical problems as well. But on top of it, they are living in the prone areas and suffering every year on this type of disaster. Another issue is that how to fit to anticipation agenda, and you know, to be able to support people before it strikes. The most important issue was that you know, with setup of forecast-based financing, the most important problem is to localize the forecast. So what we have now, we have good cooperation with ministries of emergencies, and with hydrometeorologists in these countries. And we reached the level that national societies have signed an agreement for forecasting, and they have a kind of setup about wording, about communication with the government. Now the problem is when it comes to the mud flow, it's very difficult to localize. You cannot get a forecast that it will strike actually in particular community. You can find many communities under the risk, and in particular area because, for instance, precipitation will be higher in the next 7 days. And then the problem is how to localize it to particular community to be active. So we have done a feasibility study, which actually analysis shown us the area most affected by the mud flows most frequently, but also considering the capacity of is it forecastable by hydrometeorologists and so on. So we have collected for our newly started project 25 communities, 10 in Kyrgyzstan, 10 in Tajikistan, and 5 in Uzbekistan. And our new project, we have just started from 1st of January. We are in the very beginning, and will continue for coming 3 years. And we have a plan of action to see and to look at possibility how we can help people before mudflow. And also with the changes of EAPs or regulations, now we have not just a regular or classical EAP, but now we have also simplified EAP. Maybe this one we can use, so we can analyze this all. And of course, anticipation, it's not just about EAP and to reach the level of the being able to use DREF of IFRC, but also look at possibilities how we can make an early warning systems better within the communities. I mean, using our Red Cross, Red Crescent approach. So I hope it sets the scene for discussion, and we are very open for any questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ikram. Well, I think that you did an excellent job of setting the stage there, and you somewhat answered the first question of why this work on mud flows now specifically, or why shift from heat wave and cold waves to mud flows. So perhaps Shavkat and Sarafraz, one or both of you could speak a bit to the damages that mud flows cause and what kinds of early warning systems like currently exist. What's the current kind of warning, and then perhaps response, just to elaborate a bit more. Feel free to start, Shavkat.
Sarfraz, maybe you can start, and I will complement you with information regarding the Kyrgyzstan as well.
Thank you, Ariel. Since feasibility study, we found that lots of people are suffering from mudflows rather than other disasters in the region, particularly in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. And particularly mudflows, since this disaster make more harm and calamities, and so people are responding to the mudflow after the disaster. So it's still they have lesser knowledge, and they are not prepared. That's why the new initiative of anticipation action would be very relevant and effective due to population receive forecast and get ready before the disaster strikes. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarfraz. So maybe I can also complement what was sort of highlighted by the colleague Sarah Frost. So first of all, I would like to say in terms of Kyrgyzstan that just to go to statistics, it's for instance, as Ikram already mentioned, mudflows in both countries, in Kyrgyzstan and in Tajikistan, it's number one hazard in terms of impact. And for instance, just over the last 30 years, just in Kyrgyzstan, 1,080 mudflows were recorded, according to the last statistics. It means that it's really impactful hazard for Kyrgyzstan, and there are different reasons. Of course, we have to take into consideration that some of them related to the local context, especially that, as it was highlighted, that both countries are really mountainous, and we don't have so much places. I mean, for our population to live. And also take into account that after the collapse of Soviet Union, a lot of population with all internal migrants, they start to live in such a small places in new countries, which are just developed in all this area, which again impacts all these territories. Besides this, of course, as we well know, climate change also impacting those countries, especially that all these bluffs, as we called it, mountainous located lakes, are also damaging, which again can impact or trigger mudflows in Kyrgyzstan as well as Tajikistan. Besides this, of course, since Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, also mainly our population living in countryside, they have a lot of actually they don't have so much opportunities, I mean, to grow something, or they mainly trying to use the local land. And in these terms, taking into account that it's really high population in small areas, they have to use all land what is available. And sometimes they are trying to use what they can find. In some cases, they are also not maybe look or follow all the regulations. Sometimes they're trying to grow or to use the land which is not maybe useful, or not maybe relevant to agriculture or some other activities, which can again impact to mudflows. And again, starting from the beginning, there was not so much maybe anticipation actions. Mainly it was some activities which were conducted by local government, which is again not so not enough and not so convenient in the local context. If my colleagues Ikram and Sarafos, if you have something to add, of course, please feel. Yes, Ikram.
Yes, thank you, Sarafos and Shafkat. Just to add, in terms of statistic, when it comes to mudflows, we can say an average every year from 5,000 to 15,000 people in each country suffering, and every year from mudflow. And if we say about all types of natural disaster, I can tell you official statistic of ECHO, European Commission Humanitarian Aid Department. During last decade, I mean, we are talking about population a bit more than 50 million people living in the region. We are talking about, and 10% of population, 5.5 million, affected by disasters during the last decade. Talking about why we actually, Red Cross, Red Crescent, would like to focus on the mudflow and to try to link it with anticipation, because I mean, the measures, as I mentioned before, saying about evacuation, saying about, cleaning of the mudflow channels, and local authorities knows about it, but if either they don't have capacity or they don't pay enough attention to it. But in any way, we see and we are witnessing that this problem is really huge one. And within our assessments done, like we do always in all our projects, we do baseline survey, we do vulnerability and capacity assessment. And as a result, we always see that priority for the population living there is the priority problem is the mudflow. So, I mean, we still can do. There are a lot of problems as well with evacuation. It goes to the mentality of people living there. For instance, I mean, the owner knows that the mud flow will come and their house will be definitely affected, if not this year, maybe the next. But when you propose to, I mean, another place that for construction of the new house and move them to another region, they will simply refuse it because they will say, you know, our relatives and family living here for centuries and we will not move. That is another problem. So we have to find a way. I mean, we do, and we have experience in a lot of projects of disaster risk reduction, doing mud flow, cleaning channel, or for instance, early warning from one community to another, a lot of things. I mean, also evacuation drills, doing for them mapping exercises, a lot of things. But I mean, if we can use available resources, for instance, draft of IFRC before mudflow strikes, and we know at least the regions, we know, though even include many villages, we are very much looking to make it successful for the future and to make resources available to help people before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikram. And Tim has asked a question that I think might be good to have kind of upfront. How quickly do mud flows happen? Is there a warning phase where the mud builds up and accumulates? Or are they very, you know, quick onset events, more like an avalanche or say a flash flood? Or does that depend upon the region and the weather, etc.?
Thank you for question, Tim. It's very quick. I mean, because you know what is mud flow actually? When you have for a long time the highest precipitation rain, then you can imagine if from up from the mountains it goes with mud and with stones, with everything to the valley. It I mean, it's very fast. It's like you say. I mean, maybe not like an avalanche, but it's really fast.
Great, thank you.
Maybe
And so,
yes.
you want to add something, Shavkat?
Yes. Just Ikram also mentioned, like it depends on the local context as well. I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, you are a bit quiet.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Now I guess it's much more better. So it depends on the local context mostly. I mean, since both countries are really mountainous areas, and depending on the area, it can be like it can happen quickly. Of course, we have warnings on mud flows, or in general warnings from the Ministry of Emergency Situations or local hydromet offices. But usually it just says that in upcoming, for instance, like 2-3 days, depending on the precipitation, we are expecting like mud flows. But again, as it was mentioned, the localization is also not good. So that's why I mean it's really almost impossible. I mean, in this current situation, I mean, to expect where you in which places we're expecting these mud flows.
Yeah, thank you. And so, other than this issue of localization and not necessarily being able to predict the precise community in which a particular mud flow is going to take place, what are some of the challenges that you are either encountering or you anticipate encountering as you try to kind of adapt mud flow anticipatory action to kind of the existing structures, or vice versa?
Sarafros and Shavkat, if you don't have anything, may I answer? Okay, I mean, within our project, what we are looking for is, of course, we will do, there are a lot of things to do. I mean, research, assessments, I mean, with not just in places, but also mainly with stakeholders we have in the region, in the country, with hydromets, in which area they can forecast and how. I mean, we at least can test it. I mean, we have also for the second year planned consultative visits to our region by specialists of Anticipation Hub as well. And until that time, we would like to test different ways of what we can do. So we should actually, that is really new to the anticipation or to the making EAP for forecast-based financing. But at least to try to look at possibilities and definitely test it. I mean, to make kind of standard operating procedures, what we can do. And though even the region would be, I mean, would include like tens of villages, but at least to test, I mean, in the most vulnerable, or where we have more people under the risk. And then based on this experience to look at, I mean, how it actually can be matched to the existing anticipation approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarafraz. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to add to what is said already, regarding future climate projections in Central Asia, it demonstrates that warming trend across these countries with annual average temperature rise to 2 Celsius to 2.5 Celsius by mid-century, and which increases the risk of heat waves, which also affects to mudflows. And precipitation trends already increased significantly across the region in Central Asia in the past 30 years, with, as reported by ECHO, said, total annual precipitation is about 4 to 7%. And projected increase will be 1.6 to 2.6 millimeter in monthly precipitation by 2030 to 2060, mainly in the winter and spring. That is increases the risk of floods, mudflows, landslides, especially in mountainous regions. And also regarding, give me a second. So since the introduction, as Ikram mentioned, of the anticipatory action for SDF mechanism in Central Asia from 2019, national societies, communities, and local authorities expressed interest to further cooperate with German Red Cross in Central Asia to expand the anticipatory action approach to cover mudflow in the region. Since this type of disaster caused more calamities, and since then the new project has begun, and we have many activities like conducting an applied research and assessment for identification of the possible early action in 3 countries. Then we have also to identify and propose the menu of forecast jointly with Hydromet in 3 countries. Also in this regard, we have activity in development of pilot early action protocols, anticipatory action plans on mudflow. We have also related to this component, we have activities like anticipatory simulation exercises to test the pilot early action protocol in 3 countries. Additionally, we have carrying out the technical meetings with national society, with government, to identify possible early actions for mudflows. Also, from our side and national society, we can implement capacity strengthening activities like training and providing equipment to host national society program staff, and also to integrate the anticipatory action into tools and process of contingency plans. Thank you.
Thank you. That's interesting to know what the project will entail. So most of the interviews for the case study itself actually took place in kind of June and July of last year. And so since then, there was an activation in Kyrgyzstan for heat waves. And I was wondering if, based on that experience, there was anything that you would kind of take forward as a lesson to apply to the work on mudflows going forward, since that's not something I've had a chance to discuss really, or to put into the case study.
Yes, thank you, Ariel. So first of all, with the activation of this first heatwave EEP for Kyrgyzstan, but in general also for Central Asia, I would like to say that it was really good chance for local national society. I mean, to have like opportunity to develop such kind of like evaluation protocols, which means that with all this experience, we are ready to develop new protocols. I mean, even for mudflows, this was mentioned before, most probably even starting with a simplified version of this EAP. Then, of course, another thing which should be highlighted that within this activation, we gained a good experience of collaboration with local authorities, mainly with Ministry of Emergency Situation, local hydromet, Minister of Health, which could be also used during our work with mudflows here in Kyrgyzstan as well as in Tajikistan. And besides this, of course, the main thing that the staff of the host national society, I mean the Red Cross side of Kyrgyzstan, already familiar with not just with the development of the EAP, but also with general with the forecast-based financing as well as with anticipation approach. And also not just with the development process, but also with the activation process, which is again help us and also give us new opportunities to work with mudflows scenarios here. And of course, another main thing that with that activation, we gain the trust of local partners on country level, especially on anticipation approach. So as it was mentioned, starting with FBF almost like 4.5 years before, at the beginning, it was really difficult for us, I mean, even to collaborate with local authorities, because the anticipation itself or FBF itself was really new for all of us, not just in Kyrgyzstan, but in the whole region. But after the activation and after the development of this cold wave and heat wave EEPs in both countries, and after the testing all these EEPs, we step by step gained a good trust of from our partners, especially from the Ministry of Emergency Situation, local hydromet, which for sure will help us also to work on new hazards like mudflows. And besides this, of course, with this activation last summer, we also tested our EEPs in terms of the inclusion of contingency plans, especially on COVID scenario, which for sure in upcoming EEPs or like works will be also taken into account. I mean, since it's really like a huge topic for all of us starting from the 2020. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you, Shavkat. Ikram, Sarafos, is there anything that you would like to add? I know that Shavkat's probably the primary person for the Kyrgyzstan activation.
Yeah, I would like just to compliment that, you know, our experience of testing and also activation. We can also give an example of testing in Tajikistan of cold wave, not only heat wave as well. it gives, I mean, a lot of improvement on the local capacity. People, because when we started 4 years ago, it was really difficult to explain the approach of anticipation, because national society, they are thinking about response in case of disasters. And now they understand that they've invested a lot, I mean, by emergency funds, by different resources they have already in places, being it non-food aid or food aid or cash assistance. And I mean, the anticipation, it's good example that you can help people before, and you will save money as well, and you will save life. And it's, I mean, now in the agenda and in the strategies of the national societies as a priority within the disaster risk reduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think that with that, I would like to open it up in case any of the participants have any questions for the panelists. You can raise your hand. Or just unmute yourself and speak. Go for it, Tim.
Sorry, I feel I'm hogging the questions, but it's even though I work for the Anticipation Hub, I'm still a bit new to anticipatory action. So I had one question, just perhaps for people like me who aren't so familiar with the process of developing an early action protocol and kind of implementing anticipatory action in a country for a particular hazard. And so I suppose the question is, how you see the process going. Is there a point where you might say, okay, anticipatory action doesn't work for mudflows simply because it's too difficult to get the system in place, the forecasts are not localized enough, or it's impossible to tell where these mudflows are going to happen in the country and the countries are too big? So is there a point where you just say, okay, we stop, this process doesn't work, or this approach doesn't work for mudflows? Or is it more a case that you just say, okay, so this idea didn't work, so we need to keep going? I'm just wondering, kind of, for those that are sort of less familiar with anticipatory action as a process, how long do you keep trying with something, and particularly something that's so challenging like mudflows in Central Asia?
Ikram, I see your hand up. I assume you want to jump in. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very, very good and important question. You know, when we did feasibility study, so we can say that, I mean, it differs, the system, it differs from country to country, and capacity and willingness of the government, especially, to work on the particular issues. For instance, in Uzbekistan, it would be very difficult. So our feasibility study shown that government is not really open to share the data or forecast in a way that we need for forecast-based financing. While in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, with our experience of 3 years programming, 4 years programming of FBF, it's obvious that it's very welcome by the government, and it's proved by the signed agreement and also by experience of activation for another scenario. But for mudflow, they are even more open because it's really a huge problem in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. They're dealing with every year. And for them, of course, it would be just great if Red Crescent, Red Cross can do in a systematic way to help those, especially in the south of Kyrgyzstan, because it's most prone to the mudflow, or in the parts of Tajikistan where it's happening every year. Government is very open, and this is the key for FBF programming. While in Uzbekistan, we feel doubt, but we will try, we will see if it can be done or not. But in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, actually, we have a background and setup to do so. Another issue is that whether we will fit into the requirements of IFRC emergency action protocol, even simplified protocol. That is something that we have to discuss, and we have to engage also our colleagues from the Climate Center, from IFRC, and from our anticipation Joma Red Cross. Thank you.
Yeah, that last point about kind of fitting with the current requirements was something that stood out. Well, for me, for sure, in speaking to people. And I think that in some respects it may, remain to be seen how flexible the funding or the setup can be in order to accommodate different kinds of hazards. That's just my personal opinion. Did anybody else have any questions, thoughts, things they would like to add?
Just if there's no other questions from the audience, maybe Ikram and Shafkat and Sarah, for us, you could just run us through the next steps, what will happen next in this process, and maybe in the next 6 months or something, what you'll be doing as the next phase in this.
Well, as I said, we have just started our project. So we are starting now with baseline surveys in our targeted villages. That was selected already, as mentioned, by feasibility study. So we have communities selected already. They are all prone to the mudflows. And we have number of activities for the inception phase. Means like, communication with local authorities, establishing teams, vulnerability and capacity assessment. We start with also with trainings for the teams, and some round tables and meetings with the local authorities, with higher level national authorities as well, looking to the possibilities of all the available data, working with the hydrometeorology and so on. This is planned for the coming 6 months. For the longer term, we have actually many things to do, and contingency planning inside also. We have testing of SOPs once developed within the contingency plans, but also simultaneously working on the EAP discussions with IFRC, and then turning to the international consultancy in certain stage of the second year, when specialists of international level can come and see what we have reached and how we can fit into the FBF EAP system of the DREF IFRC. Thank you.
All right. Well, last chance for anybody to jump in and add anything or ask any other questions. And if not, then thank you very much to our 3 panelists for taking the time to speak with us all, and also to help organize the case study and provide your contributions to the case study. Thank you all attendees for joining us this community conversation. I think
Thanks a lot to all. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ariel. Thanks so much, team. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a nice morning, evening, afternoon, whatever the case may be. And yeah, see you at the next conversation.